So Joey Scabs, aka Morning Joe, asked Uncle Fester, John Brennan, if he received bad information regarding the Mueller report.
I'm just curious, Mr. Director, how surprised were you by the findings yesterday, by the conclusions that were drawn? And I'm just curious, did you receive bad information throughout this process, like so many of us did, that there was more there than ended up in the report regarding collusion?
Well, I don't know if I received bad information, but I think I suspected that there was more than there actually was. And I am relieved that it's been determined that there was not a criminal conspiracy with the Russian government over our election. I think that is good news for the country. And so I still point to things that were done publicly or efforts to try to have conversations with the Russians that were inappropriate. But I'm not all that surprised that the high bar of criminal conspiracy was not met. I am surprised at that second part of obstruction of justice in terms of how it came out. I don't know whether or not Bob Mueller wanted the Attorney General to pronounce on that issue, or whether or not Bob Mueller felt that it would be best for Congress and American people to determine whether the weight of the information indicates that Donald Trump did try to obstruct justice. So there are some surprises there, and that's why I think getting to the full Mueller report is the best way to get some of these, if not all of these questions.
So Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, they look like they're at a hospice facility watching a 10-year-old boy in the last 2 hours of his life. Like, how can you be that disappointed that the Russian collusion story was a complete and utter farce? Like, they didn't actually believe this, right? I was under the impression that everyone from CNN and MSNBC, they were just completely lying. Like, did they really believe this ridiculous claim that Trump was a puppet of Vladimir Putin? Even though that Donald Trump, the first two things that he did when he was in office, he bombed Syria, he threw missiles into Syria, and he put sanctions on Russia. He really was a puppet of Vladimir Putin. Like, do you not look at his foreign policy at all? How can you draw that dot by just looking at his foreign policy? He's not pro-Russia. Like, you have to be utterly without context to believe a story like this. That's why I never covered it and never had any interest in covering it, is because I don't want to waste brain cells on such stupid fucking stories. And I don't want to talk about this because I really just I don't like covering this at all. But I find what's really interesting is that MSNBC has really put themselves in the absolute worst company in the foreign policy establishment. Like, having John Brennan as your senior intelligence analyst is like having Bernie Madoff as your senior financial analyst. And just don't take it from me. This is part of a letter from the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. The subject is Support for Brennan Far from Anonymous. And I will read. Mr. Brennan's own record is clearly tarnished. When he was chief of station in Saudi Arabia prior to and after the bombing of Khobar Towers in June of 1996, rather than uphold the integrity of existing intelligence, he went along with the decision to avoid creating problems with the Saudis. After the attack, which was carried out by Saudi elements linked to bin Laden and al-Qaeda, Brennan helped push the memo that the culprits were Iran and Hezbollah. So, before John Brennan was the senior intelligence analyst for MSNBC, before he was director of the CIA, he was the chief of station at Saudi Arabia during the bombing of the Khobar Towers in June of 1996. The Khobar Towers were a housing complex used for coalition forces involved in Operation Southern Watch. Basically, they were there to ensure that Iraq was compliant after Desert Storm. A truck bomb detonated the complex, and the bombing was carried out by al-Qaeda. John Brennan, instead of telling the truth, he blamed Iran and Hezbollah for the attack. even though it was completely clear and established that it was done by elements linked to bin Laden. Because he didn't want to start problems with the Saudis, I guess, right? If he told the truth about the bombing of the Khobar Towers, if he didn't blame it on Iran and Hezbollah, who have never attacked the U.S., then maybe we would have been more aware of the dangers of Al-Qaeda. There's more. As head of the Terrorist Threat Interrogation Center in 2003, Mr. Brennan failed to give the State Department complete statistics for terrorist attacks. The initial publications of Patterns of Global Terrorism in April 2004 touted a decline in terrorist attacks in 2003 as a vindication of Bush administration policies. The publication later had to be recalled and revised when it was discovered that the CIA had left out a month and a half of data. John Brennan was in charge of that process. Instead of receiving a reprimand, he ended up being promoted. So he cooked the books to lie, and he cooked the books in order to make it seem like there was less attacks due to the Bush administration policy, and it was just a complete fabrication, and he ended up being promoted for it. It shows you the merit system in the CIA, doesn't it? Mr. Brennan has assumed the role of passive spectator in building the fraudulent case to justify the 2003 invasion of Iraq. He has claimed only vague awareness of the CIA's so-called enhanced interrogation program. Physical records tell a different story. Brennan was CC'd on a minimum of 50 memos dealing with waterboarding and other torture techniques. Senator Saxby Chambliss noted that Brennan's boss, A.B. Buzzy Krongard, told the Wall Street Journal that Mr. Brennan had a role in setting the parameters of the program and helping to seek Justice Department approval for the techniques. So not only did he lie about having a vague awareness of the CIA's torture program, he actively endorsed the program. He actively pushed for it. It's like we're through the looking glass right now with this guy. How does he have any credibility? He's a liar and a fraud. Mr. Brennan also attempted to cover up the truth about CIA torture. Senator Mark Udell denounced his actions in a floor speech on December 10, 2014, the day after the Senate Intelligence Committee published the executive summary of the conclusions of its 4-year investigation of CIA torture based on original CIA documents. The investigation not only revealed almost unbelievable heinous practices, but also demonstrated that senior CIA officials were untruthful in claiming that enhanced techniques produced actionable intelligence that could not have been obtained by traditional interrogation practices. With strong support from President Obama, Brennan, who was a CIA director, aggressively fought publication of the Senate report. When you have evidence that the torture... like it's getting humorous now. When you have evidence that torture is not effective as a tool for receiving information, and you do it anyway, I almost come to the conclusion you torture people because you're just a sick old bastard who likes doing it. Like, we don't live in the universe of 24. Like, there's not a ticking time bomb on some bridge in Manhattan, and if you're fighting for the codes to defuse the bomb. Like, have you ever heard of a time bomb in a terrorist attack? Just be real. Terrorist attacks are usually formed by trucks or planes or whatever. There's usually not some sophisticated time bomb going off. The whole notion that torture gets you the information to stop an acute terrorist attack that's going to happen any moment is absolutely absurd. Here's Senator Udall. Quote, "The CIA has lied to its overseers and the public, destroyed and tried to hold back evidence, spied on the Senate, made false charges against our staff, and lied about torture and the results of torture, and no one has been held to account. There are right now people serving at high-level positions at the agency who approved, directed, or committed acts related to the CIA's detention and interrogation program. Mr. Brennan is now publicly insisting that Russia meddling in the 2016 election. What, however, was CIA Director Brennan saying when the alleged Russian meddling was taking place? Did he warn President Obama? Did he warn the leaders of Congress? According to press reports, Mr. Brennan did brief Democrat Senator Harry Reid on ties between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and Reid then wrote FBI Director James Comey demanding an investigation. You see how absurd this is. Like, this is unbelievable. So he bypassed. I'll just keep it going. However, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee has said that he was not given the same briefing as Senator Reid, introducing the weight of national intelligence into partisan politics, as Mr. Brennan appears to have done in his official capacity, is forbidden activity. So instead of going to the House Intelligence Committee, he skipped that, threw it to Harry Reid, just so it could become a partisan issue. And it ends, we have all had clearances and deeply believe in the importance of intelligence officers in conducting themselves with professional integrity, particularly with regard to remaining unentangled in party politics. VIPs is comprised of men and women of highly diverse political views, from Republican to Democrat to Independent. We agree on one thing. When a professional intelligence officer obtains classified information, they accept an obligation to appropriately report facts without regard to political leanings. This is not about being a Democrat or a Republican. It is about doing the job of unbiased intelligence analysis. This is why VIPs has, over the years, written memos challenging the intelligence basis for policies and decisions of George W. Bush and Barack Obama, as well as Donald Trump. So the reason why I'm reading this is because I think the big story here is that you have the corporate press infiltrated by the worst of the intelligence community. I'm not one of these people who thinks that everyone from the CIA is bad, but there are certainly bad apples, and those bad apples have a way of climbing up the ladder. John Brennan is an embarrassment. He is not a patriot, and he is a gross human being in every way imaginable, and should never be celebrated as someone who's worthy of respect and honor in this country. However, if you can see from other corporate Democrat, I don't know, whatever you want to call them nowadays, mainstream Democrats, mainstream liberals, they really started to like him. They really started to honor him, should I say. Let's look at Bill Maher. Let's see how he reacts.
Yes, I don't usually say it's an honor to have somebody on my show, but it is an honor to meet you and have you here. And I want people to know, we had this booking a long time ago. This isn't just because of the events of recent weeks. You were scheduled to come here, and I thank you for honoring it. And, some people on the right have accused you of wanting to monetize. That's their argument against you. You're not here to monetize anything, are you, John?
All these crazy Trump supporters are saying you're here to monetize. I'm surprised they know what that word means. Hey, John, you're not here to make profit off the collusion scandal, huh? And my PA totally didn't send you that question in advance.
No, I am not. I didn't ask to keep my security clearances. Former directors don't do that. We keep those clearances because sometimes those in government want to be able to avail themselves of our experiences, our expertise, our knowledge about certain issues. So people serve on commissions. Sometimes they serve on private sector boards, whatever.
And Bill, sometimes we infiltrate news networks to push out propaganda. Very normal.
This is the first time in 38 years that I haven't had a security clearance, and the basis for the revocation is bogus. Mr. Trump and his administration didn't adhere even to the process that they reaffirmed last year. And the politicization of security clearances, either the granting or the revocation, is a real threat to our national security, which is why so many people came out and opposed his action. And so I certainly hope...
So many people came out for you. Admiral McRaven said... He said, please revoke my security clearance. It would be an honor.
So many people came out for you. He's talking to him like he is the father of a handicapped son who's like pushing him in a stroller in a marathon. And John Brennan just looks evil. There's nothing about him that looks pleasant. He is the most cantankerous, insidious-looking, menacing man I have ever laid eyes on in my entire life. He looks like a cross between Uncle Fester and the Goombas from Mario Brothers the movie.
Considering what you did to Brennan. Yeah, so everybody with a brain is on your side. It's interesting, Jared and Ivanka still have clearances. You, one of the guys who was the architect of getting bin Laden, does not.
No, Bill. John Brennan is the architect of lying about bin Laden. He is the architect of putting a false narrative on the Khobar Towers attack, saying that Iran and Hezbollah were responsible for it when it was Al-Qaeda all along. He is complicit and responsible for Al-Qaeda's future attacks, including 9/11. But Bill, you are completely and utterly without any type of context of foreign policy. You are a shill. You absolutely know nothing about politics, and you are just a corporate lapdog, and your audience are a bunch of sheep members. You are a disgrace.
It seems as though Rand Paul was the one who put this idea
Yes.
in Donald Trump's head. And
Dead to me, Rand Paul.
yeah, well, Rand Paul has never served on the Intelligence Committee. He knows not of which he speaks, but yet he has this impression that I'm monetizing.
I can't watch any more of this because it's gross. The fact that the corporate press embraced a man like John Brennan is a complete indictment on them. And I think the only silver lining from this bullshit Russia-Gate collusion story is that people are very much more aware of how the corporate press and members of the intelligence, not everyone is bad, I'm not saying that, collude together to put a false narrative out there. Now, this will probably be part of the Bro History podcast that's coming out. My name is Henry Zamota. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Look at the podcast. Bro History is on iTunes, Spotify, Google all the podcasting platforms. But subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're really trying to grow it, and we need your help. So press that subscribe button, and peace.